Welcome back to the Savvy Founder podcast. I am so excited that you decided to join me this week. And this week is actually part 2 of a 3-part series. So if you have not gotten a chance to listen to the first part of this series, then definitely go back, watch that one, and then come back to this one or listen. It depends where you're consuming this, if it's on a podcast platform or on YouTube. But go listen to that one first and then come back to this one because it's all about creating a regulated launch. And last week we kicked off with talking about mindset, which is absolutely the foundation. We also dove into how do you go about creating your vision? What does a savvy founder do when they're getting ready to go into a regulated launch? How can you actually start to take the goals that you have and regulate them and normalize them in your nervous system? How can you use movement practices to help you really step into whatever it is that you're bringing in with your launch? Also, making sure that you know how to curate your environment so that you are in a place where you can really flourish and you can be present while also getting what you want out of it. I also had a guide that was attached to that episode, and as I was building out the guide, it's actually kind of turning into a free mini course. So if you haven't gotten it already, then go ahead and click the link in this podcast episode and definitely check it out because it's developing into an entire course. And after today or whenever you're listening to this, the second part will already be in there. So today we're going to talk all about organization. And I get it. Sometimes organization is not really sexy, but organization is key to a regulated launch. If you have ever launched and felt like you were flying by the seat of your pants, you're hopping from task to task, you're wanting to show up online fully as yourself, but in the back of your mind, you're stressed about if this link is working, if you set up your onboarding correctly, if you did all these things. And from my experience, I know that if I go into a launch of something and there is structure that is in place, there is organization that is in place, it allows me to, for one, tap into my creative energy so much more because I'm not having to worry about logistics. And it also helps with just being able to put full focus on what matters the most versus that scattered energy of hopping from one thing to another. So for this part, what I'd love to challenge you with is I know going into a launch, I'm going to assume this is a program launch for you, that you have been taught various different strategies of how you can do this. And the truth is that they all can and do work. But that's not really what's important. What's really important is, does your strategy work for you? And to realize that your strategy gets to look completely different than other people. It can even look different than the last time you launched. There's no reason that you have to repeat it. I like to approach things from, if you notice that something's working and you still enjoy doing that thing, amazing, keep doing that. If you notice that something didn't quite work, it didn't land right the last time, then that's a good opportunity for you to kind of play with what you can do this time that feels more expansive and that can contribute to your regulated launch. Something that really helped me in this switch was understanding the specific purpose of different parts of the strategy. So if you've only ever learned the steps and you didn't really understand the why, this is where it starts to be challenging for people to do that. But when you understand why it's important to do certain aspects, that gives you the space to swap it out for something better. So for example, if say you learned to do a masterclass and that was what you wanted to use to launch your program, you might say, oh, I have to do this masterclass. But really, a masterclass is just a vehicle for you to give your audience massive value. They are able to learn something. They're getting to peek into your world and see what it is that you're all about. And if they like it and they are all in, then they can always take the next step in working with you. That's the why behind it, whereas a masterclass is just the vehicle for doing it. But when you understand the why, then you can swap that out for something else and still achieve that same goal in a way that aligns with you. So that could be a challenge. It could be a secret podcast. It could be lives on Instagram. It doesn't even matter because you can achieve that same mission by doing it so many different ways. And so for you, it's just most important that whatever you're doing for your launch, I had to say this first, that it is in a way that matches you, who you are, and how you want to show up. Okay, cool. Now that we got that note out of the way, let's kind of dive into this. So the first step that I take when it comes to wanting to get organized for a regulated launch is brain dumping all of the activities that you think could contribute to you having a successful launch, and allow yourself to literally write anything that comes to mind. This will not be your list that is the list. However, it is helpful in my experience to just get everything out of my head and onto paper so that then I can decide, yes, this one feels good, or no, maybe this, or I can play and tweak with it this way. So I want you to think about what it is that you're launching, and I wanted you to think about big picture, what are the steps that you need to do this? And I also want you to think about what is your actual goal with it. If you have, okay, when you were setting your vision in the last episode, did you have, I want to launch my program. Maybe I want 10, 20, 50 people in there. Okay, cool. Now let's work backwards in how do you actually going about doing this? For most launches, there's a couple phases that tend to be the same. And so I urge you to kind of use that to decide what goes underneath that. So for one, you have your initial idea, whatever it is, and this is not in a specific order. So I'm just going to go in this order and we're going to shuffle things around later. So for one, it's the thing that you're actually launching. So we're working backwards, right? You have the thing that you're launching, whatever that is. There are certain things that before you can give someone a link or they have the ability to go directly to that, certain parts need to be set up. So I want you to brain dump all the activities that would include. Is your audience already warmed up? Does that mean that you need to be doing content? Does this mean that you need to be getting more visible in front of your audience? Does this mean that you need to start talking about what it is that will be teasing it out in your content? Think about that part of, okay, I'm going to warm up my audience. And then I like to think of the vehicle between those things. So I have the offer that I want. I want my audience to be ready for this offer, that it's not coming out of the blue. And then there's something in between. It could be your masterclass. It could be a secret podcast. We kind of talked about some of those before. Now, whatever that looks like, so you have this basic structure of, here is where I am. I need to get my audience on board. I need to give them a vehicle that's going to facilitate me going into that launch. And then you have the actual launch itself. So now let's go back and take this under the lens of organization. You're going to go and brain dump all the activities that you need to get there. So for my podcast, there were a couple different things that I had to go through for this. For one, that was the actual creation of the podcast. So creation of the offer. Then it was getting my audience aware. That was another part that I needed to do. I also wanted to have a podcast launch team, and I needed to make sure that I had content for the podcast as well. Once I had those big buckets, areas of, okay, this is me working backwards from I need to launch a podcast. And once you have this is what sets you up to be able to execute flawlessly, or at least execute in a way that even if things aren't all going as planned, which they never do, you're still able to get it done, which is the main part. And that's how we also become regulated in our launch, is that we're not kind of jumping from everything is good to like, oh my God, it's chaos and I have to respond to this emergency. What's going on? This is how we kind of get ahead of that. So then what I did is from there, I started to break down specific actions. So if I'm going back to my example of having a podcast, that looked like, okay, the graphic for the podcast, what's the name of the podcast? The podcast needs to be hosted somewhere, which means that I need to pick where that's going to be. And I need to go ahead and have the episodes uploaded. Oh, speaking of the episodes, I need to figure out what is it that I want to talk about? How do I want to structure my episodes? Are they episodes by myself? Are they guest episodes? How far in advance will they be? Then for the launch team, okay, I need to let people know that one, there's a podcast coming so that they can join the launch team. How do I get people excited about sharing this podcast? What are specific things that I can do? How can I incentivize them? Oh, I can do a giveaway. Okay, what giveaway would be valuable for the people on the launch team? Amazing. How do I let my audience to know? Okay, I need to create content about this. Oh, what is something that I'm going to be talking about on my podcast that I can start talking and seeding into my content now? So you can see how there's going to be very specific actions, and this episode should not be long at all because this is more of a brain dumping exercise on your part. So like I said, if you have not already gotten that guide, then definitely get it. And this part will be in there of just a way to brain dump and get really clear on your specific actions. Once you are down to the specific actions, and I want you to get the actions so freaking specific that it's literally down to something that you can do in 15 minutes. 15 minutes or less. I'll talk about that more in the next episode, but get it to where it's literally a task. This is not, I'm going to post on social media. This is, okay, there needs to be, what's the theme of the post? What's the caption? What's the graphic? Like, I want it all broken down. And so chances are, if you have done this really well, this is a point where typically people will start to feel slightly overwhelmed. And before you do that, I want you to pause. Everything is okay. What you just did by doing this is you have literally taken something that is essentially you managing a giant project, and you are now breaking it into very specific parts. What this will do is this will make it so much easier for you to actually then transition this into daily action items for you to do. The last step that I do, at least in this point of organization, and then I'm going to give you a note of something to just think about, is I take all of these actions, and the way that I like to do this is I kind of umbrella them. This will definitely be something that's easier to show you how to break this out. So download the guide so that you can see how to do this, and it's going to make everything so much more simpler going forward. Now, something else to think about when you're looking at all of these actions is I would look at which ones do you need other actions to be done for. So for example, in order for me to have my podcast uploaded, ideally I would already have my description. Ideally I would already have things recorded where I'm just going in and getting it all done at the same time. And this is true for any launch. There are certain steps that something else is required first. So if you are sending out your link and you're ready for people to join, okay, your pay link needs to be set up. And then what are they getting after they pay so that they have a seamless onboarding experience and you're not then having another mini emergency of, do I need to go ahead and get the next step? And this goes into the note that I want to add on this whole part about organization is that a skill that is immensely valuable in the process of creating a regulated launch is having the foresight to know what could be coming up and to do your best to get ahead of it. So if you know that there's a potential like, oh, okay, this is what I'm going to need. Okay, how can you start to prepare yourself for that now? And the reason that this is really important is because I think sometimes when people are launching, they're doing it in their minds under the best case scenario, which is amazing. But let's plan like we're not going to experience the best case scenario, which means getting ahead of things, taking actions now to prepare yourself so that while you're in the actual phase of, okay, I'm talking to people about it, I'm getting other people like excited, you're not carrying this energy of I'm stressed and I'm kind of frustrated, something's not working. I want you to create space for yourself essentially so that when things don't go as planned, you can adjust and it doesn't feel like it's super overwhelming. And I think the more that we plan up front, the more that we plan up front, the better this is, regardless of what's going to happen and whether or not that's in your control. And the truth is, I don't think I've ever had any, and I don't know if I know anyone else, where everything went exactly as planned. But the best thing we can do is to literally plan for the unexpected, which means preparing for the parts that we know are coming. This is literally the same as whether or not you prep for your future days. I like to go into my days having a plan of what it is that I'm going to do, but if you're kind of just winging it, you're automatically going to be losing efficiencies, and launching is already kind of stressful because it's an extra task that you're taking on. It doesn't have to be super stressful, but it is adding on an additional layer versus something that you typically have done before. So prepare, give yourself space, give yourself grace. And the way that we do that is by creating and being organized. Even if you're someone who you don't like to do all of this, the beautiful part, and this is something that I have found gets easier and easier every time, is once I do this part of organizing in this way and creating my process, I can then just take it and tweak it and make it a little bit easier. And actually, if you already have a team, if you are starting to have a VA or you already have a VA, then this is something that you can use to also delegate certain tasks to them that they can use to going forward do this without you needing to be part of every single part. But in order to have that where it's that seamless handoff to them, it's important that you figure out what is your process. And I think a lot of times we don't really know our process. We're just flying from task to task. So with that, I'm super excited to have this out there. This is really more of a brain dumping exercise. So definitely get the guide. It's going to help you so much to organize your thoughts, how you're thinking about what you're doing to approach your launch. And in the next episode, we're going to be going into how do you actually go about executing? How do you set up your day? How do you manage your time and plan for your success? So with that, thank you for joining me on another episode of the Savvy Founder podcast. I know how valuable your time is, and I'm so honored that you decided to spend it with me. And for your upcoming launch, or even if you want to refine something that you've done in the past and prep for a future launch, go download the guide. And after you get it, send me a DM on Instagram at Essentially Janae and let me know how this is landing for you. Okay, see you next episode.